Welcome to the Healing My Parts podcast, a podcast dedicated to educating and raising awareness about dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID. We are your hosts, the system behind Healing My Parts, which also includes parts that function as a therapist and leader in a mental health niche space. We'll be sharing tips and tools that have helped us and many others, while also sharing insights from our own journey of living with the condition. We'll also be hosting guests for conversations to help educate, dispel myths, and most especially help those living with dissociative identities and professionals who treat the condition. Thank you so much for tuning in. And now, let's get healing. Welcome, everybody. Today, we're joined by two extraordinary advocates and change makers, the team behind Beauty After Bruises. If you have ever felt lost in the maze of trauma recovery or wondered where to turn, then this conversation is going to be for you. We're talking about what real support looks like for complex trauma and dissociative disorders, the behind the scenes of advocacy work, and the hope that's possible even after systems have failed us. The Beauty After Bruises team has been bridging gaps by providing comprehensive education to clinicians and the public while connecting survivors to resources that they need. So let's dive in. First and foremost, welcome to both of you. And I wonder if we can kick it off by both of you letting us know, for those who don't know what Beauty After Bruises is, how would you introduce somebody to it? Let's dive right in.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Mike. This is exciting.
Yes.
This is Anne and next to, Anne and
Lexi, I'm over here on the other side.
But it's just an honor to be here. Genuinely, it is. And we love what you do. We love what you've been putting out there. And so we're honored to actually be a part of it. But there's a lot of background about who we are and how we got started, which probably leads into why we do what we do. So maybe we should start there, because I don't know that all of your viewers would know that information. So if they've already heard it, well, they could just skip forward a little bit.
That's perfect. That was actually my second question. So we'll just flip it, and that's great.
Perfect. So ultimately, many years ago, sometimes I struggle to remember when. There was a 1 in the 2000s, but I don't remember if it was a 10 or a 14. I don't know. It was a while ago. Well, actually, it was long before that. Actually, we had a family member who had just a host of different things happening in their life once they hit high school, and I guess to the outside person or the onlooker, or even as a parent, it just felt like, okay, the wheels are falling off here and we're really not sure why or how or what to do. And so we tried all what I would call local methods, reaching out to clinicians and perhaps trying some eating disorder things, and thought we were making progress. And it kind of felt like every step forward had a few more steps back. And eventually, it was just years of struggling to find good help. Just at the beginning, and then eventually they ended up in an inpatient unit for mental health. And lo and behold, we were told they had dissociative identity disorder. And it was just shocking for everyone, for them, for us, because this was a time before the internet.
A long time ago.
Yeah, long time ago. I want to say 90s. Time is an illusion, so I'm really not sure.
Amen.
But yeah, it was a while ago. And so that was even a term I was not familiar with. I think back then I'd never heard that term. I had heard of MPD back then. So this was new, and the internet was new. So you really couldn't even do deep dives on the internet. You had to go to the library to find information. So it just felt like we were stumbling in the dark. And how did we get here? What happened? Lots of fear, lots of challenges for everybody, and really nowhere to turn. And so we fast forward to many years of all of this chaos of how do we get the appropriate help, driving sometimes 2 or more hours in one direction just to see a competent therapist. And after a bit, we realized, okay, this is something. In our situation was a little different in that the family member their primary abusers were not family members. And that is not always the case with DID. Unfortunately, I think that's a rare, exception. And so they at least had a family who was really fighting for them, saying, let's figure this out. And investing time and energy. That's not the way it usually works. And so we were watching our loved one experience from the sidelines, losing some of their friends that they met through that process, because they didn't have the support they needed. They didn't have resources. They like us didn't know where to turn, but they didn't have anybody to help them find it either. And so years into it, and that's when in the 2010s, 2014, somewhere in there, we decided we needed to do something. We needed to make a difference because this was just completely unacceptable that people don't know how to find the help they need. They don't know where to look. They don't know the terms. They don't even understand that healing is completely possible and wonderful. And so we wanted to do that. Now, the sad part is we really honestly thought it was rare. We really thought there might be 3 people in the whole state of Pennsylvania that had a dissociative disorder, and I'm not kidding. so we
Surprise!
were exactly we were in for a giant surprise. So we started raising funds, we started helping where we could, and the learning curve kind of smacked us in the face. But fortunately for us, we ran into Lexi, and Lexi was able to help us kind of. I'll let her explain who she is and how
Mhm.
she met with us and all of that good stuff. But without her, we wouldn't be even one half of what we are. So my friends and I are the ones who end up doing we raise the money, and Lexi teaches us all we need to know about dissociative disorders. We've come a long, long way, and then helps us spend that money.
I
So I'll
love
let you take
this.
it.
Hi, so I'm Lexi. I am the other co-founder of Beauty After Bruises, and like Anne was saying, I did come across them. A nice coincidental timing. Our paths crossed, and of course, we always try to protect Anne's family member and their privacy, so we don't give too many details how that came across, but. We happen to just have like matching initiatives. I am a survivor myself. I am also an organized abuse survivor. And so I had not only gone through a very similar experience with so much treatment that had failed, but whether inpatient, outpatient, so many failed attempts and so many misdirections and missteps, and um, just honestly, a break. There's just such a breakdown, even in my own care. Despite the fact I was able to access it, I was able to afford it and get there. I still didn't have a positive experience. I known that Anne's family member did not have a positive experience, and in all of my years, had similarly lost so many friends and people who I considered very close to me to incompetency or inaccess or financial disparity or non-supportive family members, all of these things. And so I similarly had a big passion and was running into the same roadblocks myself of now no longer being able to financially support my outpatient care, my continued care. Everyone I knew, I couldn't think of anybody who had that part figured out for themselves. Um, and so then to see this fundraising effort happen here and the desire to branch and make this possible for all patients, all dissociative clients, all complex trauma survivors, of course I was so on board, but could clearly see, the lived experience piece is pretty relevant, or the sensitivity to how to engage and talk with survivors, how to interact with their clinicians, just some basic trauma education across the board. These are people who are very kind-hearted and loving and business savvy and a friend group, but they didn't come with education. They weren't themselves therapists or clinicians. They were just people with big hearts and a proximity to trauma, but not lived experience of it. So I knew that they had a steep learning curve as well. But what I was finding, and not only with them specifically, but all of my friends, loved ones, and extended family and friends and whatnot, is that so much of dissociative disorders and the education around it is pretty inaccessible. It often gets pretty heady. It's very high academia, or it is sensationalized. It's kind of one or the other. You kind of swing in extremes. It's either so trite and oversimplified that it's actually misleading, or it's so heady and too wordy that it's hard to follow and make sense of. And so I wanted to find a way to how can we educate the public and survivors and up and coming therapists in a how do we bridge that gap? How do we make this approachable and accessible and inviting and have it make sense? How do we put this in plain English? How do we make this it's just really digestible? And I had a passion, thankfully, for doing that. Something that I also found early in my own treatment was even when I was young and let's say incorrectly so, was often kind of put in the position of educating my peers, educating staff. Like I very quickly picked up on these things and pretty quickly was put to work on units and things. So again, inappropriate as that was, it still was a background I came in with. And yeah, found a passion in doing that. and continued to dive in and further my own education and stay connected. And now, as my role with the AD, I kind of take all of the education side of things. I do all of our articles, all of our social media website, also help train and educate incoming clinicians, and we able to talk to colleges and give some education there. So any of that like education piece, as well as just like the encouragement and hope or necessary lived experience side that a survivor might really feel is lacking from somebody who just really understands and gets it. That's kind of just where my passion lies and kind of the role that I play over at PAB.
It's a sizable role.
It is.
It's not small, but
I'm like,
a
oh,
really
is that
important.
all?
Exactly. Exactly.
It's
She
fantastic.
is the jack of many, many trades. And yeah, we would struggle without Lexi for sure. Um, but yeah, we all have well, now that we've grown and we're nationwide, and we do global work as well.
Yeah.
If you know, as long as individuals can, as long as we can share similar language, we can provide guidance. We just can't provide financial support outside the country. We can't provide therapy boxes and things. I'm sorry,
Put your phone on mute.
I thought I did. See, I need a grandchild to
Yeah,
help me with these
we'll cut
things.
this part out. Don't you worry. Let her sort this out.
All good.
I'm trying to figure it out.
Just
It should be right in front
put
of
it
me.
down the whole way. This isn't too hard.
Well, I thought it did.
I don't know.
I'm going to let her manage that. Now I forget where we were.
Well, it's all right. Well, I gotta finish this and then I don't know where is, oh, there it is. Okay.
I couldn't find it either. Now I feel better knowing that you
We'll put
couldn't
it.
find it. She's my
All right,
yes.
we'll restart. I was gonna chime in anyway to say, just for clarity, so for folks who don't know anything about Beauty After Bruises, so I would say that we have kind of three tiers of outreach. I'd say we primarily have our financial aid component where we offer funding to folks who are seeking ongoing outpatient therapy services, mostly to cover or help aid in those expenses. We used to also offer acute care options. At the moment, it's just temporarily on pause, just due to lack of funding, quite honestly. The last year has been really difficult. A lot of things changed in the zeitgeist in the last several months, and it really changed things financially. So at the moment, it's on pause, but we have every intention to get back to that. Of course, that's the mega dollars. But that's like our main component is our financial aid program there. We also, though, offer our therapy box project. That's our second branch, and that is for folks who, as we have discovered, and many will be familiar, just because you are familiar with your diagnosis or might even know a therapist in your area doesn't mean that they have availability, doesn't mean that you're able to get there, doesn't mean that you're financially able to see them, and maybe we're not able to financially support you at that time. Maybe we just don't have the funds. So not everybody has access to a therapist, even telehealth, even all of these options. There just might legitimately not be anybody available for them to see or the accessibility for them to do so. So for these clients, we put together a pretty comprehensive box, therapy box that contains a lot of therapeutic workbooks and a variety of modalities, and we'll work with the survivor to determine what is best for them. What do they need most? What's their learning style? What's their workable style? What is it that they need most? As well as a bunch of comfort items, journals, therapy items there, art supplies, art therapy, um, grounding items, fidgets, toys, a wide expanse of tools for healing to try to be as multifactorial as we can be in the healing process for somebody who would otherwise go without. We want to at least offer them some support. Obviously, we know that nothing compares to face-to-face therapy, and we would love for that to be the option for everyone. But if they're otherwise going to go without anything, how can we meet them where they are? How can we give them some support in the meantime? And hopefully it is just in the meantime. Hopefully down the line they have someone that they can see. So that's our other main initiative that we put a lot of effort into. And then I would just say that the third tier is pretty much all of the public education and that support and the hope and and working with clinicians or even law enforcement or colleges or kind of that communal understanding and all of the places that trauma touches. How can we make those folks better informed, more competent, not just informed, but competent, and really able to meet survivors where they're at healthfully and safely and lovingly and compassionately and all of those things.
Do you have time to sleep ever?
I know.
Thursdays we
Thursdays?
try.
Okay. I think it's
Try.
incredible what you guys do. I mean, when you look at the impact and the breadth, like what an incredible tri-tier organization you guys are running.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. It's a lot of
There's
fun,
kind of
honestly.
nothing
It
like
feels
it.
we haven't found anything like it, and that's not for lack of trying. I mean, I'm constantly reaching out to people in the UK, in Australia, in Canada to see if they'd like to imitate something
Yeah.
in their own countries because we received so many requests from across the globe. Can you help us with a therapy box? Can you provide
Right.
guidance in our country? And we just don't have boots on the ground there. So I'd love to see others do something similar. We don't need a branch of Beauty After Bruises. They can create their own and do what they would like. But yeah, it is a lot of fun and it feels really good when I mean some of the letters that we receive are they're just so heartwarming, you know, because yeah, but you know, you work with a clientele. This is a group of individuals who've really had very little love and compassion in their life. And when a therapy box shows up, it sometimes we'll even get letters where people will say, I can't even go through it.
Yeah.
It's going to take, I can take out one thing a day because it's too overwhelming to have received that much love. And everything is donated. There's nearly nothing that we buy. And the tools are fantastic, and we're really, really picky because
Yeah.
if we figure if this might be the only thing they have, we want to make sure that it's a workbook that's going to make a difference and that it's really good quality journals and good quality art supplies. And you know, once in a while there will be some things in there that you know someone donated that may not be as high a quality, but the meaning is incredible. But we feel it's chock full of love and just it feels good to send it, and I'm sure it must feel really good to receive it because I know I would love one myself.
That literally is what I was thinking about when you were describing what's in there. I was like, this is amazing. Just imagine getting all of that. I totally get why you'd want one yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was like drooling over it, both as like
Oh.
as a survivor and also a
Oh.
therapist, it's like this is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, one thing we've also seen over time is, or what that we started to really recognize. I think initially when we had the idea, it was kind of a small box, kind of,
Very.
a handful of items, and then realized this is probably the only box that these survivors will ever get. I can't imagine a world
Yeah.
where that would be duplicated and we don't have enough to go around. But we would like to be able to support them with maybe like 5 years or so of items that will last them that long. Of course, not every item will last that long, but maybe we can at least get them that far. How can we give them as many items that will carry them hopefully at least that far? Hopefully the world is different or their financial situation is different or access to care is different by then. But we don't want just to be a drop in the bucket. Sometimes
Right.
that feels like they have already been streamlined hope in these very small drops at a time, just one over time, and that's somehow supposed to satiate or nourish them. And I don't want it to feel that way, where you feel like, oh, this was supposed to be healing. This was supposed to be my bright spot. This was supposed to be the thing that brought hope to my life, but it didn't get me very far. I think sometimes that can be even more demoralizing than not getting it in the first place, is when you feel like once again something quote unquote failed you or let you down or wasn't enough. And it's hard not to internalize that as, is it something wrong with me? Am I just broken? Is there no options for me? Like it's very easy to think that way. And so how can we support survivors enough that it gets them a little bit farther? And maybe it really does take a little while to go through it all, but that also allows you to kind of learn what coping tool works for you in that moment at that time. It'll change over time. It will probably be dynamic and flexible, but also hopefully get you some quality supplies enough that will last a little while too. And also what I was thinking when Anne started, while a lot of this is definitely fun, I don't know if that's the front running word I
Right.
would use to describe that. And I think we're often pretty regularly railing against that toxic positivity narrative that often can surround trauma care, is almost trying to infuse people with too much hope that is not balanced with practical reality. Sometimes we try to stay really grounded in that reality place, but this is very, very heavy work, and it's very heartbreaking to just be consistently confronted with the inequity and just how marginalized a lot of our folks are, but just how minimal resources there are, but also the reason they're in this position to begin with,
Right.
that trauma. It's so heavy. It's so grave, and it's really sobering. And so I think kind of our way through that, and how do we continue to sleep or stay well or stay nourished or be able to do this, is to try to infuse fun and levity and joy wherever we can. I'm a little bit of a silly person, so that helps a little bit, but we try our best to keep it balanced. It's not so light levity where all of this is as no big deal, or that we're just brushing it off. Definitely not. We're taking it with true sincerity, but also aren't just, rose-colored glasses, pie in the sky, sunshine and roses kind of approach to it either, which can also be pretty unhealthy and not really get you where you need to be. So yeah, I think it's all about balance. I think over the last 10 years we've been trying to find the balance of all of those things.
Yes, that's a good point because the majority of the time we do spend in coupled pain,
Yeah.
partnered with the people that we're helping.
Yeah.
And so when we get to put together a therapy box, that's when it gets fun because
Yeah.
then you can go, oh my goodness, okay, here's the beauty of it. But there is a lot of ugly in it as well.
Yeah.
And, the majority of the phone calls that we're having are not pleasant phone calls. They're calls with people who are in deep need and are searching. They need to know how. How do I find a therapist? How do I know that they're competent and that I'm not just going into one more person? And please forgive me if you are a therapist who's listening and your website says you are trauma informed. I don't want this to sound like a knock on it, but trauma informed is something your client already is. They don't need any more information on trauma. What they need you to be is trauma competent. So we are looking for how do we help people find a competent trauma therapist that knows how to help them manage things, how to dismantle all of this, how to put it back together in a way that makes sense, and how to heal, because it is very, very possible. And with the right person, it can happen much more quickly than when you're stumbling through all the darkness alone or with someone who maybe does have good intention but didn't get the training that they need, didn't take the steps that they needed to
Yeah.
learn what they needed to learn. So we're walking through the mud with a lot of folks and
Yeah.
a lot of therapists too who are
Yeah.
saying, okay, this client's in my office and this thing that my professor told me was going to be rare, I'm now seeing it and I don't know what to do
Mhm.
and I don't know how to go forward, but I can't. Thankfully, there are many, thankfully, that don't lead their client to believe that they're too much.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're too much. This is too hard for me. What they're really saying is, I don't have the skills. Not that this person is too much, but that they are, in fact, too little, that the therapist has too little to offer.
Right.
And I like when they call and say, I can't abandon them, but I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And then we can walk together hand in hand and get to where everybody needs to be, because this is a person whose heart is in the right place and they probably are going to do a very good job with their client. They just they have a need too. So everybody's learning together, but
Yeah, it's a skill set that's definitely missing in the
Mhm.
vast majority of clinicians working because we were all told that this is something that is rare.
mm,
Yeah.
well, and there are more than three people in Pennsylvania.
Just a couple.
I,
Oh,
I
you
would
know,
imagine.
Yeah.
yes, I
They're
think
all in one person, but there are a couple more.
oh my gracious. I think there are three in our little teeny tiny town.
Oh, there are more than
Yeah,
that.
Well,
exactly.
if you
But
look
yeah,
at statistics, I
Yeah.
mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
the
Exactly.
statistics are pretty overwhelming, especially if
They
you're
really
gonna
are.
just look at DID and then add OSDD1 into the mix.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And, you're
Exactly.
looking at a level global prevalence that's pretty close to depression.
But
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's actually, I wouldn't say it's common, but it's not uncommon
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's not at all rare.
Yeah.
So it does get frustrating to hear those things today.
And
We
over
should
the
know that.
last several years, it's been very encouraging, of
Mhm.
course, to see the progress in trauma knowledge and awareness. You mention about how trauma affects the body or whatnot, and somebody will immediately jump back in with, the body keeps the score. So like, hey, at least you've heard the title.
Right.
So
Yep.
you at least know that this is reaching the general public a little bit. That is very encouraging. At the same time, in the psychological field, I think it did get a little bit buzzwordy at time and then kind of maybe oversimplified where, hey, just take the EMDR training over the weekend and you can just heal trauma now and kind of very, yeah, just overly simplified to make it seem like that's all you need to know. You got it. You're a trauma therapist now. And I think one of the the accidentally important roles we came into doing was helping therapists who call and are trying to support their clients understand that, actually understand the limits of their education and how much they actually do need more. And maybe here are some places where we've maybe made a few missteps and what we can do more. And then where do you go to get more education? Where do you turn that's reliable and trustworthy? And in the meantime, how can we support your client through that? And is this an instance where we can find them maybe somebody else while you get that? Or is this a time where you can actually negotiate it together and stick it out and provide them adequate support and healing and helping them make those tough decisions, but also get that education? Has been, yeah, an unexpected role that we've played a lot, but also a really important and valuable one. It's been an interesting thing to see as we have grown more trauma aware. The competency didn't necessarily rise with it. If anything, it kind of emboldened some clinicians to think they can take on something that they are not quite equipped, and that ended up harming patients in the process. So how can we try to mitigate that trend? Because it's just so much more additionally traumatic for a survivor to walk in feeling safe and feeling like, oh, I'm going to be with somebody who I can trust and who knows what they're doing and feels trauma skilled, and then to feel extra betrayed or let down or abandoned or traumatized when they don't have that skill set. It's just, yeah, it's devastating. We want to prevent that as much as we can when possible, because that survivor will probably unfortunately be really turned off to therapy after that. And once you try and you put all your eggs in one basket and it goes so badly, it's really, really hard to try again and trust that someone does absolutely have the skills to help you. They do exist, they're out there, and that they deserve the chance to heal and to see that, the fruition of that.
It's so challenging to hold that kind of realistic place where you're kind of traversing this huge crevasse, right? Where
Mhm.
Yes,
you
yes,
have clinicians who I think genuinely want to do good.
Mm.
absolutely.
And when you look at the kind of trauma sector, it's fascinating the work that I do. You know, have been specialized in eating disorders for 25 years, and the vast majority of folks who treat eating disorders will say, we don't treat trauma. So, like,
Ugh,
we're going to
yeah,
treat your eating disorder. We're going to
yes,
pretend you don't have trauma, even though
yes,
90% of folks with eating disorders have a trauma history, right? And
absolutely.
40% of folks with DID and OSDD have an eating disorder. So
Yes,
it's not helpful to not treat trauma. It's helpful to
absolutely.
treat the whole person. But I also think, I agree with you. I think it makes sense to be realistic about it. I think it's equally harmful to abandon clients that you have a relationship with,
Yes.
especially clients who have attachment trauma, right?
Mm.
So saying,
So
I
true.
don't have this skill set, so therefore I can't treat you. I think there's an ethical issue with that. I think the
Yeah,
Mhm.
answer is being honest to say, I don't believe that I have the full skill set that I need to get you to where you need to go. However, I'm willing to get consultation and training, and I think we can
yes,
figure this out together, but I want to be upfront and honest about the
Right.
fact that I am not an expert in this.
Mhm.
absolutely.
And when
Yeah,
you partner that way, right? Like that, I think everybody's eyes are open as you're moving forward because we've got to get out of this thing that we're in where I'm an expert in it and nobody else can treat it,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Because then nobody gets care.
yeah,
Right. Right. Well,
yeah,
and there are so many facets to it, and I'm sure you've seen many of them, and probably most of your listeners have experienced many of them as well, where, when we have a lot of folks who will just reach out through an email and say, "Hey, I'm trying to find a therapist for X number of years now. What can you tell me that I don't already know?" And so we give them a really nice outline on how to start over. Here's what you want to try to do. And it is effective. But the sad note with a great big asterisk in it is, yes, these wonderful therapists do exist, but the turnover is not fast, because when you're a trauma client, you're going to be in that therapist's office for 5 years, maybe more. And so they may have their limit of the number of trauma clients they can manage, because it's hard for the clinician too. This is not easy work. And so they may know their limits and say, okay, I have however many it is I can manage right now. I can't take another. So it isn't always that they don't exist and that they aren't plentiful enough. It's that they're full up,
yeah. The
and
caseload's
those
true.
exactly, and it's not going to turn over quickly. And so how do we then, and some of the question that we will then answer is, how do we then keep you safe long enough to
Mhm.
get on somebody's list and to have that door open for when
Yeah.
one of their clients either moves away or gets well enough that they now have space. Or we can continue to grow the number of therapists in the area. And until that happens, how do we keep ourselves safe enough, and how do we grow enough? And sometimes that is through just workbooks. And there's so much good stuff today online that you can look at. There are great podcasts you can listen to, so many opportunities that were not there as little as even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And goodness, even the science has, now we have science. It isn't just conjecture.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that's huge.
Yeah, we have so much data now. And yeah, but I completely agree with what you were saying earlier too about the idea that, just because somebody has limitations to their education or awareness, if you've got a relationship with that client, the duty to really try to stick it out and really help them as much as possible, I feel like is actually very important. And I think sometimes we get clinicians who call because they're kind of they're at the ready to give up point and try to get them somewhere else, and trying to show them how valuable it actually can be to stick it out, and that just because they have limitations doesn't mean that they're completely inadequate or unable to help this client. And so much about healing trauma is about healing relationships, and those and seeing that, hey, this might not be perfect or ideal, but we're actually doing a lot of healing by me sticking with you, and I'm going to do the work behind the scenes. I'm going to do the crash course. I'm going to get the education that I need. I'm going to really see you through this, but you aren't too much, and this isn't too much, and this is going to help me help you. And I think sometimes having some of the biggest growth we've seen for some clients is actually when they had an
Yes.
inexperienced client, a therapist who this was new to them too, and they did the work, but they did it with them together, and it was very much a team effort, and feeling like someone was always fighting in their corner and cared enough about them to go out and get this education and to do this with them, and to not just hand them off to somebody else when they really could have. Sometimes I feel like that's like the biggest healing, especially if they have attachment trauma, but even if they didn't, just to be like, wow, this person really, really saw us through. And I think it's absolutely doable. I think there have only been a couple of instances where maybe that wasn't the case. And it was usually just because the client was truly in a state of crisis. They really there was no margin for error. There was no margin for anything. But that's so rare.
Yeah.
And we want to try to encourage clinicians to go, hey, even if you feel like you're swimming in the middle of the ocean and you've got without a paddle, like, we can help. Let's help support you with that. How do we arm you with the resources that you need and the tools and the education so that you actually can stick this out? And it'll probably be really impactful and really healing for both of you, actually, to go through it together. Yeah, it's an empowering thing to witness, and the fact that we've gotten to witness it so many times over the year is actually where I borrow a lot of my encouragement in an otherwise demoralizing landscape where you're like, there's not enough, and no one
Yeah.
knows what they're doing. Like, it could be very discouraging, but to get to see that has really lifted my own spirits over time.
I love that therapists can call you because I think about also the pressure that many therapists are under in their peer consultation groups or another consult,
Absolutely.
right? Because the message that you get is, what are you doing? Like, you need
Yeah.
to not be treating this person, refer on.
Yeah.
And it's like, refer on to who?
Right,
Right.
exactly. That would
You
be
know?
unethical. If you're talking about ethics here, that's the unethical choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and at what point do I not learn? I mean,
Yes.
if I just keep passing everybody on, then I'm
Yeah.
never learning it either. So I still need the consult. I still need to learn this.
Right.
That's kind of
Yeah.
part of everyone's business should be growing and learning. The world evolves. We need to do so as well. So it's important that we take those extra steps. I know we tease now. Well, I shouldn't say tease. It's kind of a personal goal, a passion. I hope I get to see it before I leave this world. To encourage those who are teaching at the professorial level. Did that come
Yeah.
out right? That's
I
not
think so.
the
Yeah.
professorial level. At that level, to keep in mind that everyone has trauma, every one of us.
Yes.
And if we were to begin by training therapists from the start, before they ever leave with their bachelor's degree, how to treat trauma, that would make more sense.
Yeah, we could
Because
treat almost
if we
anything.
then you can treat anything. If you can help someone with a dissociative disorder, you can treat just
Just
about
about.
anybody. And rather than say, let's just talk about how to help anxiety and depression. Not that those are minor things, but if that's where we start and that's where we end, then we miss a huge number of people. Whereas if we start with trauma, because it really is just a matter of knowing the steps and having that compassion to do it. If we start there, everybody wins. Then you're ready to walk the journey with any client that comes into your office. So I would like to see it change in
Yeah,
the
the
way that
toolbox for treating trauma is so comprehensive
it
and
is.
so multifaceted that it's applicable to so many other conditions that it's just so helpful, you know, yeah, even if it was maybe initially started as like an imagery exercise for containment or something, you know, for trauma, you
Mhm.
know, it's so actually helpful for folks with OCD or just regular folks with no mental health issues at all. Like, yeah, just like that toolbox. If you've got that toolbox, it's just so much more applicable to so many other things that it will really just help your practice, help your patients, just help you in your personal life. I don't know. It's just a really
Yeah.
valuable skill set to have.
It's interesting. I feel like what I've heard over the years are therapists who will say, yeah, I have a skill set to treat one-time traumas or trauma that
Yeah,
happens
yeah,
in adulthood, right? But when it comes to CPTSD, OSDD, and DID, then I start seeing people start to run.
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm.
And
yeah,
even the, sort of the dissociative disorders kind of get split up in terms of who's
yeah,
willing to treat what or feeling like they
Right.
have the skill set or maybe they don't. And yet the numbers are so huge
They are.
yeah.
that it's so important that I think as clinicians, we do get the training we need or consultation we need and figure it out. There's so many people suffering.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you brought up a really good point, actually, when you were talking about, most of the time you can help therapists work it out. And I love that they can call you. But what do you do in that situation where somebody's really acute and they need a higher level of care? Because, I mean, honestly, most of the folks that I know that are talking about this, it's like, well, where are you sending folks with the ID and OSDD? And
Yeah,
everybody's like shrugging their shoulders and throwing their
yeah.
hands up and going, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know.
Yeah,
Well,
that's actually a really good question and a painful one, especially if we're talking acute care and crisis.
mhm.
We are in a genuine, true crisis in terms of inpatient care. When we started, there were just like under less than 10 inpatient facilities that were well trained in trauma and dissociation. That was what they did. That was specifically what they treated. It was an inpatient unit that was specifically for trauma and dissociation. It was still less than 10, but that was their focus. That was what everybody did there. The rules were different there. The atmosphere was different. Everything about it was very much trauma and dissociation. And over the last few years, we have so radically downsized that we're basically at like 2.5-ish at this point. We
Literally.
basically just have Dominion in Virginia, River Oaks in New Orleans, and you can do some immediate crisis stabilization at McLean's. They've got a couple day thing, but you also have to live there. Like that one's not an out of state thing. At least that's just where we're at currently. It's changing every day, so who knows by the time this gets, all the units are currently changing. And there are some residential places, don't get me wrong, that's an increasing opportunity for some folks, but they are often extremely expensive, almost always out of pocket with only like minor insurance here or there. They're also a whole lot less regulated and less structured, and they often don't have the same capabilities to take on true acute crisis. Like if you're having major safety or medical concerns, they usually don't have the resources for that or to protect you from any outside threats to your safety in the same way that unfortunately a locked unit
Right.
can do, which unfortunately a lot of trauma survivors do have that concern when they come in with them. That is a threat that many are under. So sometimes a locked unit is actually preferable or necessary for them. So that's an increasing option, but it's a very impractical one that only a very small percentage of the population is going to be able to access or have a positive experience at. Though, as of course, even if in an ideal world we had many acute care inpatient facilities that were like locked units or whatever, or even if that were the case, many people have negative experiences there too. I'm not saying that's the answer, that's the ideal, that's what we're aiming for. Just that it helps tend to some of the major high levels of safety risk that some patients experience. But at the moment, we don't have those. The mainstays that have been there since the beginning of this work, the places that were training grounds, the ones who trained most all of the clinicians that are out there, those who are responsible for that, they have now closed their doors too. They are no longer here, and that is really scary, and it is really upsetting. And we experience it all the time as well, with clinicians calling and going, "Where are you sending people? What are you doing?" Or even if it is just a higher level of outpatient care, being like, "Hey, this person's really acute. They don't have the ability to go inpatient, but I don't feel like I have the skills, and this is a very thin line that I'm walking with this client. I'm very nervous. I need extra support." We often have to just kind of network. And if someone's in that place, reach out to our own database or our own collection of people either in that area or that we know have availability or that we think, really might understand this particular client's vulnerabilities or just their personality type. Even sometimes you're like, well, that's a funny term of phrase in a DID, but their general temperament, broadly speaking. Sometimes we just have to go, "Hey, this might work out with this therapist. Let's give them a call and see." Sometimes we just kind of have to do our own networking or pulling out to, some of the larger communities of therapists, like the ISSTD, or some kind of similar network of clinicians or listservs, and putting out a blast asking, "Hey, does anybody have availability?" And kind of seeing if they respond, and then kind of chatting with them to see where they're actually at, what are their availability, what are their capabilities, what kind of vet them, source them out ourselves a little bit to see if this is a good match. But it's really hard, and there aren't really good options. It's not an ideal environment at the moment. It really never has been, but it's just extra dire right now, and it's very limited. I feel like we're struggling a whole lot more with that than we were even a while ago, and it has always been a pretty grim outlook, honestly, in terms of crisis care.
I feel like there's some good news on that horizon now.
Please
I,
give it.
I feel like there is now, and I could be wrong, but I feel like there might be. Post-pandemic, we ran into two organizations that have come up with just what's the word when it's new and it's exciting?
Innovative?
There we go. That's it. Thank you. My thesaurus is here. But yes, they've come up with some very innovative ways to manage these types of situations. And so we've been explaining to lots of people that we connect with now how they could take this same approach and create their own sort of PHP and eventually turn it into something bigger if they wanted to. And we can talk about that. That might be a podcast for another day. But
I love
so
that.
it's a wonderful way to allow, because most people don't, I shouldn't say most people, but rarely, you don't get a whole lot out of an acute care stay. And what I mean by that is it's really designed for stabilization. When things are really destabilized, that's where you're going to go for a short term so they can get you stabilized enough. Their goal is to get you stabilized enough to go back to outpatient therapy. You're not really going to do a lot of work there. You're just going to learn the basics. Remember, you get back to the beginnings. Let's do some grounding, do some containment,
and get you back to
notice my symptoms. What is happening? Why is it happening? Figuring out my triggers, those kinds of things. And then you go back home. But back home is where you need all of that intensive work. And a lot of clinicians don't have more than an hour in a given week to give to each client. And sometimes you're lucky enough to get to see them 2 or 3 hours, but that's an uncommon situation. And so we've met some amazing women and men who are working together to create where they've been doing like in training their own interns, hiring their own interns so they know that these people know what they're doing, and then starting evening IOPs within their own practice or day IOPs, and then turning that into a PHP sort of a thing, and really, really making a huge difference. Now it takes some time and energy and commitment, but they're seeing remarkable change, and isn't that what it's really all about?
Yes.
And that wasn't their original goal. They just saw a need and made sure that it got taken care of. And so if we could imitate one of those in every state, then at least every state would have a place to go. So that's part one that I think is hopeful. I think that the acute care world is evolving a little bit. We're seeing that there are other ideas that can be better, perhaps, than going into an inpatient hospital situation.
Or just how to even set them up in a way that is more accessible to people,
Exactly.
or more broadly helpful.
Exactly. And then the other thing is that I know Lexi and I were recently invited to work with a group of
Yeah.
individuals who are specifically hoping to revamp acute care, and even to the level where they're talking about is the worst. I have to be careful, but maybe not. The worst part of acute care is the psychiatric unit, is when you go into like that
Gen Psych.
72 hour gen psych is
Yeah.
it is not a place for anybody to be. It never feels safe. It often there's I have yet to meet a single person on this planet who says I had a great gen psych experience. That has just never happened.
Even if they don't have trauma. It's just
Exactly.
not
It's
set
just
up for
not,
anybody. It's
no,
not set up for wellness for anyone,
not at all.
unfortunately. But it's a necessity if you're in crisis, sadly.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's the only way to get through. But it
But
needs to be so much better.
yes, and so we're working with a group of people now who we're trying to just get together, like a fact sheet that
Yeah.
you can take. This is what you need to be doing at Gen Psych. With they need to be looking
The
for
units
trauma. They need
themselves,
to
how
be
to train
looking
the
for
actual units that
yes,
themselves,
so
both
that
general psych as well as those who are aiming to be trauma units.
yes, so there will be something that even clients could take with them and say, okay, this is why I'm here, and this is, I want you to help me with this protocol. So there are, I think there's a growing awareness among really good clinicians that we need to revamp things, and but the better part is that there are a lot of people who are trying to make it happen now. Whereas we're not just all sitting around lamenting anymore. We're taking steps and creating initiatives and innovative ideas and it'll take some time, but I think the internet helped in that
Yeah.
way. I do see big changes on the horizon.
Well, and what I was just going to say quickly is that I think something that we've noticed over the last couple decades, honestly, but especially in the last couple of years, especially in America where healthcare is so challenging, is that I think before we were trying to come at this like either acute care or even like higher level of training for dissociative disorders, kind of in the standards and methods that we've been using thus far. Let's just try to train people differently, or let's try to get units opened, and that requires a bunch of funding, or the government, or appealing to hospitals, and like just trying to like get these units made, and then it's just going to be one unit in the middle of Missouri that everybody's got to go to. Like, I don't know, these kind of the way we've always done it is
Right.
kind of we're just trying to like do it the same way. And I think over time, especially recently, we learned like maybe we're just going to have to go about it differently. That's not working. It's not stable. Even the ones who have been here for decades can't last under this model, even though there's constant people coming in. How do we do this a little bit differently? What if we do kind of do it from the inside out? What if we just try and make general psychiatric units more trauma aware and informed? And what if those who are really interested in trauma or eating disorder clinics, what if we make sure they are really good at trauma as well? What if we just kind of make it so that kind of everywhere as it is at least decent, and while we still chip away at the same stone of trying to create more trauma units again. Like, of course, that's always going to be an ideal, because there are very nuanced needs of dissociative clients more so than others. It would be lovely if we have places for them to go that are very specific to their needs. But if that's not going to happen, that's what we've been trying to do for decades, is get more, and all we're getting are less. What are other ways we can do this? How can we work from the inside out and just trying to make everything at least neutral? At least if you go in there, you might get stable, you might get at least just the crisis care you need, but at least you won't be walking out with gobs more trauma. Because at the moment, that's unfortunately becoming a bit more of the norm, and we don't want that to be the case. And it prevents a lot of survivors from going to get care at all, and that's not acceptable either. No one should be scared to go get care. And how can we make sure that that is not a concern they need to have?
Oh, I have so many thoughts.
Oh.
We need to have coffee.
Let's
Yes.
solve the world together.
Yeah.
Well, it's just so interesting from so many different perspectives for me. So I'm somebody that was diagnosed in the 90s,
Mhm.
and we had actual dissociative disorder units available
Yeah.
at one point in time. And then my personal experience was that all got kind of uprooted with the False
Yeah.
Memory Syndrome Foundation going
Yes.
after
Right.
people's licenses. So I was somebody that didn't get
Yes.
any care.
Oh.
I'm old enough to have been diagnosed with MPD, but got no care,
Mhm.
Oh.
which has been an interesting journey.
Oh.
However, whatever the transition is, figured it out to be, high functioning enough to have a career in this field, primarily like I had said, was eating disorders. But the last position I left before coming to Meta was actually in a place where I was running an eating disorder unit, general psych, PHP, and often pinch hitting for behavioral health director in the inpatient psych unit. And I will say that particular facility did an amazing job at ensuring that all of their workers were very trauma informed. But I also think trauma informed is not enough. You need to be able to recognize the signs and symptoms of dissociation, and
Absolutely.
people can't. So, like, the entire hospital would take training at orientation on being trauma informed across all departments. But people don't know what it looks like when somebody's switching. And it's
Yeah.
Right.
easy to blame a behavior on being a behavior as opposed to being dissociative phenomenon. I love the fact that there are more and more people that are starting to listen to the fact that there are tons of us out there with dissociative
Yes.
disorders and are starting to be really interested in how can I recognize it? And oh, I think I have these people on my caseload. Oh shit, what
Yeah.
do I do? You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
but
Right.
we're getting that passion, that interest of people who really don't want to do any harm. And I remain really frustrated by our systems of basically insurance, whether they're public or private or commercial, the limits that are getting placed on care, where we have
Absolutely.
census targets and dollar targets. Mental health is not a moneymaker, so hospitals don't love to have the units in. Most of them will tell you
Exactly.
that they lose money. That's
Exactly.
why most of them are closing. The
Exactly.
Hmm.
insurance companies don't want to authorize enough days to actually make a difference. So they're doing just enough to patch somebody up and then sending, well, I sound depressing, but I think
Yeah.
that
Well, that's
there,
why we're here. That's why we exist. So we're with you.
yeah, but it's like, I think that probably the answer really is in exactly what you're saying. Where are the community care options? And are there ways that certainly PHP and IOP tend to be more financially sustainable from an organizational perspective than an inpatient or residential unit is? They're less costly to run. They're
Right.
still helpful to people that
Yeah.
Hmm.
are suffering, especially if you can get some evening programming in. I swear, I
Yeah.
feel like 7 p.m. is the witching hour for most
Yeah.
people.
So true.
It's like the worst time of night.
Yeah. But it's also a really nice option if to prevent crisis. We'd like to prevent people from getting to crisis if we can, and if you give them good supportive care when things are just starting to get a little unstable, a little unsettling, you can really subvert that whole course of like where that whole trajectory was going to go. You could even possibly prevent crisis. And it'd be nice if we just had those options more readily available and they were competent and well trained and folks could get that care at a small, and then we don't even need, I mean, of course I still want to
Yeah.
have us well supplied
Right.
with
Right.
acute care options, but if we also just create these more accessible ones, and it also helps folks learn how to live in the world as well, how to make sure you're well grounded after a session or after treatment, to drive home, how to go back and forth, how to lets people stay in their homes with their families, with their support systems, to not face some of the triggers and stresses of being on a locked unit or not being able to,
Yeah.
losing some of your autonomy, not being in control of your meals or the other patients, or like there are benefits to being able to do an IOP or a PHP. And if even if that was all we lucked out with getting more of, it would still be an invaluable option, and
Yes.
it would have a lot of supportive benefits too. Yeah, in immersing you, staying in your world, experiencing the same triggers that you often might at home or at work or on your way there,
Yeah.
that you're going to in your quote unquote real life when you're back. You get to approach those and then go get care and support for them that day and learn how to manage them.
One of the things that, and at least this may sound silly, but it's very, very real. One of the things that I hear most when clients will call and say, I know I need acute care because I can't manage my day-to-day life, but I need to stay local because I have a dog, I have a cat,
Or a
I
child.
have a
Yep.
child,
Yep.
I have, a part-time job, I have a volunteer position. Because again, we're talking about individuals who have relational trauma,
Absolutely.
and that's the one thing they cannot bear to
Compromise.
leave.
Yeah.
They just can't, because if I have to go away for even 2 weeks from my dog, my cat, my fish, my child, my volunteer position, whatever it is, it feels like life has ended, and
Yeah.
it's very emotional just to even think about it. And so they can't bring themselves to do that, and I wouldn't want them to have to. So when we can create more options and
before getting to
everybody
that
wins.
point. Yeah.
Exactly. If we just knew, okay, every state has a place you can go for, a week. And sure, I mean, some states like Texas, obviously it's going to take half a day to drive somewhere. They might need 5 in Texas.
Yeah.
But if you knew that there was an IOP in your state,
Mhm.
because let's face it, Medicaid never crosses state lines. You have to stay within your state. And most of our clients are probably going to have a lower income or Medicaid. So we need something in every state. They're just, all these things have to be
Dozens,
thought
yeah.
out. But if you knew you could go, and when you weren't going to have to leave the dog unkept and the child unkept and worry that you're going to lose your children, or
Yes.
worry that you're going to lose that part-time job, or worry that you're going to lose your apartment, all of those things, what a difference it would make to just make this easier. And then the hospitals aren't complaining because they have to close the unit because it doesn't make enough money. There's no anesthesiologist that's needed. There's no transplant that's needed. This is all in workshops and groups, and those don't make money. So it is always going to be the first thing to cut.
Yep. There's actually an eating disorder program that's run virtually, intentionally so.
Hmm.
Oh,
It's
that's
through an
smart.
app and it's within health basically. It was founded by Wendy Oliver Pyatt, who's a psychiatrist, and Abhilash Patel, really passionate, compassionate human beings. But what has been so phenomenal about that particular program, and I can't tell you how many times I've thought, I wish somebody would do this for TID. I wish somebody would do this for
Yeah.
dissociative disorders, because what they've been able to do is hire people across many different states. They're able to offer about 15 hours worth of programming, and
Wow.
that allows clients to plug themselves in where
Mhm.
they
Where
can.
they
So
are.
people can
Yeah.
still work, they can still go to school.
Yeah.
They're getting really good care. The statistics, the research that they've done on their model looks really, really good. And I've thought so often this would solve so many problems for
It
people with trauma and
would.
dissociative disorders who are
Absolutely.
still able to work. Even those who aren't, you'll have that connection, community, professional care.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't have to give up your insurance or your kids or your pets or your apartment or your car or whatever it is, because I feel like there's been so much loss already.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Oh, I need to learn
Well,
about that
yeah.
program so we can share it.
And the gains too.
They're
So of course
amazing.
we would love to make it so that, folks never need acute care, but even if they just needed a higher level of care, the value that so many experience, like it makes it sound like I'm naysaying these programs. Absolutely not. I think the value that survivors can experience in just seeing other people like them, knowing that they're not alone, that other people have dissociation, that other people have DID, that they have these symptoms, that they have these traumas. I think sometimes you can come across that messaging, but it's hard to believe until you've actually gotten to face interact with it and see another person and see like, oh, they're just like me. Actually, they're pretty normal. They've got a life too. They've got a job too. It's not as sensational as I felt like it was. Some like, but having that like in-person connection is so valuable, and making that
Yeah.
accessible for people to have is really, really moving. I know from my own self and my own experience, having it took me a while as well to figure out that so many of the issues I was struggling with were trauma related at all, were dissociation related at all. But so I went through all the different steps of similar eating disorder treatment, then eventually trauma treatment. And at each stage, I felt I was meeting other people like me. But then even partway through, I still always kind of felt at each of those steps like I was too much, or nobody else was like me in that
Mhm.
environment. Like compared to all my peers, I was struggling, quote unquote, worse, or I had something extra that they didn't, and it made me feel bad, like too much. I just felt too much. And then of course when I found out that I had DID, that explained some things there. But even then, some after a bit of that work, I still felt like I was too much, so to speak. And then when I discovered and fully put together the organized abuse piece, it all kind of clicked for me. But the internet, but also just like my exposure to other people like me eventually, who also had the same background, I was like, oh, this is actually so healing, so helpful to see that I don't want this to be their experience. Of course, I would much rather prefer that none of us had to go through this. But that community, that sharing, that relating to each other, in a safe way
Yeah.
was so healing. And these types of groups or systems or these higher levels of care are pretty much some of the only times where you can feel pretty certain that this is going to be as safe as can be. You can never mitigate all risk,
Yeah.
but you're pretty confident that at least most likely physically, mentally, you're going to be safe within them. Whereas if you're just trying to create groups online, that you don't always have that guarantee. It's helpful. It's still very, very valuable. I've had tremendous value from it. But sometimes these higher levels of care like curate a very, very safe atmosphere for you to truly, fully be yourself. And in dissociation, so much of us is hidden. So much of our stories, our identities, who we are, how we feel, everything about us, we're so well trained to stay hidden. And having that real safe congregation of people and place to just be and know how I am is fine and other people like me or like me is really, really valuable. So I would love if we keep getting to a place where we make these environments safe and that, you know, people can also encounter or like tackle their safety concerns and other stuff too. But just that community and seeing other people like you and knowing that you're not too much, you're not too big, you're not quote unquote crazy, you're not any of these bad things that the society or the system or whatever or past therapists have led you to believe about yourself. You're none of those things, and you deserve this type of care, and other people like you are out there and deserve it as well and can get it. Ideal world, I know, but a utopic one.
And then you can live either the life you always dreamt of, or what I know Lexi always refers to as a comfortably boring
Yeah.
life. I would just like to be comfortably
Oh, yes.
boring.
Yeah. I don't need an exciting life. I don't need to achieve. I don't need to be an all-star. I don't need to thrive even. I would just like to be boring. I would like to be boring and unexciting and uneventful. I've had enough eventfulness in my life. Let's just be boring.
Boring is dreaming, isn't
What a
it?
dream. What a dream.
Life goals. Who knew that was going to be one?
Be duller.
It's really cool to think about the ways in which people are becoming increasingly open-minded.
Yes.
You know, in general,
Yes.
I was just thinking in so many ways you had actually answered one of the questions that I had, which would be like, you know, what would sort of the utopic trauma savvy future look like across mental
Yeah.
health, media, and the community? And you kind of just described that, right?
Yeah.
It's a dream, but I do
We're getting
I
there.
do
We're
too.
making those steps
People are
though.
hearing it.
Yeah.
They're no longer going. You're not getting the eye rolls.
Yeah.
They're going. You know what? You might be right. We have to evolve. This isn't working,
Yeah.
and how can we make it? How can we make it better? And so you take all the good stuff and repeat it, and find a
Yeah.
way to repeat it in a way that's affordable, consumable, all of those things, and it's possible. I'm
I
convinced it's possible.
Yeah, and I feel
Yeah.
like so maybe like systemically in terms of like the systems we have set up, especially in America, they might all be very broken. And especially at the moment, things are extra chaotic. Like I may not have like the greatest hope for those systems necessarily, but at least when we're talking about trauma care, we're talking about education and awareness or building community. Before, when we used to talk about this, oftentimes just the topic alone, people would kind of blanch at it or shy away from it or
Yep.
get very uncomfortable or get very shifty in their body language. Their eyes are kind of darting all over the room. They can't wait to get out of this conversation because they don't want to think about it. They just
Yep.
don't. And certainly not about dissociative disorders. Then they get extra squirrely and those kinds of things. Whereas I feel like in the last few years, you talk about that and people kind of lean in a bit. They want to learn more. They're curious, they've heard a few things have, some has been destigmatized for them, or they've just unfortunately been exposed to it a whole lot more, so it's not as immediately aversive or like I've never heard or known of such things. They kind of are like, yeah, that's a reality for a lot of people, and kind of listen a little bit more. And so then you get people who are in charge of these big decisions, companies, staff,
Yeah.
insurance,
Mhm.
programs, whatever. And before they would often kind of similarly just turn away and be disinterested. Whereas now they kind of listen a bit. They at least want to, even if they're being opportunistic and like how will this serve me or how what angle do I need to listen to it from? At least they're listening. Whereas before
Yes.
they often weren't. They're at least curious, like, well, how might I do that? And what might the value? Even if theirs is only dollar signs, hey, we can pitch this to you in a way
Mhm.
that well, I promise you, trauma is very lucrative. There will be an endless supply of us coming in and out. I'm sorry to tell you, it's not going anywhere. So if I need to tell it to you that way, I will. But at least they're listening. They're not so put off by it. But even if we have to go through these kind of backdoor methods, like the way that we're doing now, of like, how do we do it from the inside? How do we maybe even do it in a very unorthodox way? maybe it isn't from the top down, maybe we're just coming from the inside, just kind of in your ear, and then you're exhibiting those changes in yourself, in your unit, and the staff that you train, and the providers that you train, or upcoming therapists that you train, the classrooms you teach it in, whatever it is, it's slowly spreading out to the community. So even if we don't have these official systems of you go to this place and this time and this hospital system does it this way, even if you don't have anybody, even if you don't have a therapist, even if you don't have whatever, at least some version of your community is more aware, more affirming, more loving, more open, more patient, more empathic, more understanding of where you're coming from. That already can take somebody who is in crisis and already kind of put them back in a neutral territory, at least, because they're at least like, I might have a lot going on inside me, but at least outside of me, I feel safer. I feel accepted. I feel like I'm not too much. I'm at least neutral. I got a lot I got to work on inside. And I don't know, I feel like those small little incremental changes actually will make a very big difference long term. And hopefully it will keep building on that receptiveness to institute those big things that we do still need, those systems
Yeah.
we still need. But even if, in the same spirit of our therapy box, even if you have to go completely without, even if you are completely on your own, how can we make it approachable and livable and accessible, and make it okay and safe enough to just be you as you are, even if you have to do it alone. But hopefully you don't have to, and that we'll start building communities that are supportive to you and that you have people in your corner.
We are definitely moving, thankfully, away from the vast majority of people not believing it's real, which was a huge,
Exactly.
right? Like it's a huge start. So when I'm listening to you talk about a community that's open and loving and accepting, like that just feels so good to think about.
Yes.
And I noticed recently in a couple of trainings that I was giving, there's always little polls that you can do.
Yeah.
And I think it was last year where I was co-presenting with somebody and we asked, what people think of when they think of DID. And it was phenomenal to start hearing people say things like a coping skill, a brilliant way of
Yes.
surviving, survival, all sorts of things. There was only one person in the room who said Sybil, which I
Yeah.
feel like,
That still shows progress.
but seriously, because like if you think about what the answers would have been like 5 or 6 years ago, I
Yeah.
think that it would have been the reverse, you
Agreed.
Exactly.
know? And this past year, well, it was last month, the beginning of this month, actually, when I was giving another training, I had a poll of, when you think of DID, then there's four different options. And the last option was, is a made up disorder. And only one person out of close to 70 something chose that one. So,
Wow.
Mm,
and I really think that again, like 5 years ago, it would have been the opposite. So we definitely
Yeah,
are making progress, which is
for
really
sure.
exciting.
Yeah.
so many things. I think
Yeah.
we've seen great progress in many things, not just individuals who are beginning to understand DID and they're not even questioning it anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but even in our first responders, we live in a very small town in Pennsylvania, and kind of in between. I don't know, in the middle of New York City and
South Central PA.
yeah, we're in the middle of everything. So you have a lot of local police departments and
Okay.
volunteer fire departments and those kinds of things. But we're even seeing that they are beginning to understand that even like child trafficking,
Hmm.
um, that it's not people coming in big vans and from out of state, that
Yep.
it's literally parents in their own
Yeah.
hometowns. They're beginning to become very aware that this happens in every school district across the country. It is not new. It is not uncommon. It is happening all the time.
Mhm.
But
Yep.
it's what
Recognizing
they're
it and
recognizing it and asking, okay, well, what do I do
Mhm.
now? We've even had, I don't know what they would call them where you are, but here they're called school, I think, enforcement officers, who's the one person who's allowed to carry a gun in every school. But
Yes.
what is,
they're,
yeah, I know what you mean,
yeah,
but
but they're like the person who manages all the unruly kids. Um, but we've had a couple of them even reach out and say, "Hey, I think there's a child in our school that might be going through some trafficking out of their home. I don't know how to approach it. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to call. I don't know that anyone's going to take me seriously." And that's kind of, I mean, that's exciting to hear because at least they're paying attention. Whereas before, they weren't even thinking about it.
Yeah.
Devastating for the reality of
Absolutely.
what is happening. But there is
Absolutely.
definitely a time where not only would that person or this area have not recognized it, not seen it, but even if somebody had told it to them directly to their face, it would have been a denial and
Absolutely. It doesn't happen.
an accusation that you're crazy or
Right.
something, like
Well,
as opposed to noticing it themselves and inquiring more. It would have been very much the opposite.
I think in the past, if you had brought that to someone's attention, they would have said, what kind of trouble are you trying to
Yeah,
stir up?
exactly. Yeah.
As opposed to, tell me more.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can do. There might be somebody in trouble here. And so there are subtle shifts.
Yeah.
And
I
I think that they're good.
Yeah, and I
That's
think
so
it can
hopeful.
be,
Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say, I think it can kind of be demoralizing when you look at like the quantifiable measures that we have, like we were talking about inpatient units or the way that care is harder to get. Like sometimes those like numerical things seem like the that hope is dwindling or that it's a really grim place. And I don't want to undercount those things, but I think actually we've seen so much social progress and communal progress and educational progress and acceptance, and that cannot be discounted because if
Right.
anything, it should be exponentiated. That should weigh more because that's what we really need, especially when we do go back to that initial idea of healing trauma and healing relationships and those attachments. And if you can have a community that is these things, understanding, aware, accepting, affirming, all these beautiful things, like sometimes you don't need the niche level, high level academia to get well. Sometimes for some people that's enough. We'd like to still have more, but like if they could have the best therapist in the world, but if they don't have the rest, it still isn't
Yeah.
going to work out for them. Whereas the reverse can sometimes be true for some. Some people, that's all they have, but it is actually enough. I'd still like to
Yeah.
make sure they have all the specific levels of care and therapists. I'd like to make sure they have that. But for some people, that is enough. And I think that's where we're seeing the biggest amount of progress. And it isn't as quantifiable. It's a vibe, it's an
Right.
atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's not something you can put in nice, neat data numbers, but you can just feel it. And having done this work long enough and having to pitch and give that introduction of who we are and that initial like elevator pitch statement, you tell so much about a person and how open or
Yeah.
receptive they are to hearing you immediately in those first few words. And that part is definitely night and day. And I see so much hope. And I just really hope we keep building on that momentum. I feel
Yeah.
strongly that we will, and we're confronted with the trauma and the grim parts of the world every day. We've got enough of that, but we've got this wave that comes in after it. That is okay, but how can I be the helper? How can I be the healer? What can we do to learn
Yes.
more? What can we do to be there and support and heal? And there are definitely far more of those,
Mhm.
and that wave is so much bigger than the initial one of the hard stuff.
Here's a question for you guys, since we're talking about healing.
Yes.
What does healing mean to each of you personally? Because we've
Great
done a lot of
question.
talking about it, right? And I think it's
Yeah.
different for everyone. So,
Yeah. That's a good question. Let me just take a brief moment to think and gather.
I don't have the lived experience that y'all have.
Go ahead though. While I gather my thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, well, I guess I could say that there was a lot of healing being a family member of someone who went through hell and lived. And I'm grateful because not everyone who went through that same hell did. Um, but there was a lot. There was a lot that I had to look at and go, how did I miss? How did I miss it? There's a lot of healing that needs to go on when you realize that
yeah,
somebody was, in your house and you missed it all those years. Um, and I think for me, it is first a level of becoming very authentic, getting really real with yourself
mm,
and determining who am I really? Not who do I present to the world, not whose wife or whose mother or whose sister, but who am I authentically? And what do I love about myself the most? And what do I need to change about myself? And then finding ways to do that that are sustainable and meaningful. So from I think it's funny because Lexi and I had this conversation. I believe it might have even been today. That the person that's in this room now, that is Anne, if you had met me 20 years ago, I was not that person that I am now.
yeah,
Um, I may have I presented completely differently. I knew who I was at my core, but that wasn't who I presented to the world. I put
Mm.
out what I wanted them to know about me as opposed to who I am. Today, that doesn't happen. You get who I am, and I'm incredibly empathic, and I'm incredibly um, I don't know. I have a lot of words. I love who I am now. I think that's where healing
Yay.
comes, is that I look in the mirror and I'm perfectly
Oh,
content with who I am. I don't care that my body isn't perfect. I like, this body has been through a lot. It's birthed children and it survived two husbands, and that's a lot because they were a lot.
so
um,
fair.
so, I think that for me, that's what it was, is becoming real with myself, accepting all the things I am and loving all the things I bring to the table, and discerning which things I needed to get rid of and improve on. And
Mm,
um, so that's what it was for me.
I love that.
Well, of course, I wanted to really listen to what Anne was sharing, so I wanted to make sure I was connecting with that. And I'm thinking in my own, and I'm sure I'm sure I've approached this question before, and I think it probably will be a different answer every time, just because where I am at and what my life looks like is different anytime it's been asked or I've thought about it. So my approach and my view is going to change with that. I think healing to me is ultimately about that true acceptance of and complete knowing. So knowing all facets of who I am, really knowing them, knowing every part. I feel like at each stage of my own healing and recovery, there was so much of myself I didn't know about my own identity,
Yeah.
who I was, be it sexuality or my own relationship to myself, or my, like what are my innate traits versus those given to me by somebody else. Having an organized abuse history, so much of my identity and identities was given to me by someone else. It was very instructed and I was told who I was at every corner. And to
Mm.
get to a place where I truly know what is authentically me, who is me out the womb, who was I always going to be, and versus what someone else gave me. But maybe I don't want to let go of all aspects of that, but like, what do I get the authentic, like, I get the autonomy also to
Yeah.
choose what do I want, what is there, who is me, what do I want to be, and how do I make all that go together? How do I know my authentic self and live that out and be at true peace with that, regardless of what anyone else says, thinks, believes. Of course, people are going to have their opinions about all of these things. The
Yeah.
world is diverse and has different reactions to some of those things. And to know that I'm okay and at harmony with that regardless. And when I'm on my own or on my deathbed or whatever it is, that I will be content with that. And I don't need, again, like I was saying before, I don't need to be amazing. I don't need to be accomplished. I don't need degrees out the wazoo, like whatever it is, the things that I would have considered markers for success or healing or a successful life. I don't need those things, and just being truly at peace to have survived and to have gotten well and to live out as myself and not constantly fighting myself or changing it or feeling at war with myself anymore. That feels the most like healing to me, and feeling like true peace, true acceptance. Um, yeah, and I can always want to, improve, of course. I think we all can, you always want to be your
Yeah.
best version of yourself, but that's very different than being at war with yourself or being at
Yes.
odds or attacking. That one comes from a shame place. I'd rather, if I can build from the inside up, where I just keep building up, and it's coming from within, like that to me feels like, yeah, like healing. That's I
Mm.
probably will always be healing some things,
Mhm.
because life continues,
Yeah.
people hurt your feelings, bad things happen. You're never going to be immune to future things to heal from, but greeting that with openness and being like, oh, okay, well, I can do this, I've done this before, I will do this, and I can, and on no one else's timeline but my own. That to me feels like the most complete picture of healing.
I love how you're both depicting healing as a journey.
Oh,
Mhm.
absolutely, yes.
And it's a kind of a journey without a destination,
Yeah, yeah, so true.
which
So
I
true.
think is unlike what, at least when I was younger, I used to think about healing like that. I was going to a destination, right? I was going
Right.
to
Yeah.
Right.
recover and heal,
Recovered.
duh.
Yeah.
Yes, it will end.
Yeah.
Not so much.
So
But
true.
but it's so realistic. It's also exciting because sometimes I think like, well, if this was the end game, that's not super exciting either. So this idea of constant transformation and evolution and coming to places of deeper love and deeper internal connection is exciting to
Absolutely.
think about.
Yeah.
Mhm. That it's funny because one of the things that I hear a lot from clients is, well, I just feel like everything's my life's over. I've failed. I'm not up to where everybody else is, and of course now I'm much older than most of them. So when I'm talking and I'm hearing that, and I think, man, I can remember being 20 and thinking everybody else is so much further than I am, or at
Mhm.
30 or 40. Pick a year. Um, Certainly there were always people who were further than I was. They owned more, they had more, they did more, they saw more, they all of those things. But that's really not what it is ever about. And it's
No.
so hard to help someone come to that understanding. And I do think we eventually we have to get there on our own. Somebody can tell
Yeah.
us about it all day long, but we really have to eventually come to that understanding that no, it's different for everyone. And what looks like, and I think life experience eventually shows us that what looks like a really well-lived life on someone else,
Mhm.
and then you get to sit with them and talk with them and you realize they are one messed up human and they're just living in a really good,
Yeah.
shell. It looks great what's presented. Um, that's when you go, no, actually, I think maybe I'm better off. Maybe I'm not as bad as I thought I was when it comes to my own journey, because we're all just so different, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
it's exciting.
I just wanted to add in too, I think I spent in terms of like healing overall, I think I spent, I had I started so much of my life out with very high expectations, not only for myself, but for other people, this kind of expectation of really high achieving. And I always felt this tremendous amount of shame for ever falling short of that. And of course, ending up in treatment so early felt like just a shame I could never recover from. Some slight to myself, my family, my whatever it was going to be that was going to be too big to achieve or correct. That I would always be some failure. Which is so untrue for one. But I also, I think even bigger than that, always wrestled with this because of so much trauma, a genuine desire to not keep doing this, to not be here,
Yeah.
to not be around. Like it was just so much pain that I couldn't really ever foresee a future. So while there was this expectation for high achieving for this future destination, I also was never actually envisioning that future because I wasn't going to be in it as far as I was concerned. Like so it was this constant push pull it was just this brutal tug of war inside my mind all the time. And I feel like through healing, not only was I able to kind of relinquish those expectations for the future, but healing to me was being able to envision a future, to imagine that that is a possibility, that there, barring unforeseen circumstances, there's a future in which you will be in it. And that then let me just but I'm actually not sure which came first. If that came first, which then allowed me to be present, or if it was the other way around. But something about like learning to be present in this moment and be grateful for this moment after spending so many years of not wanting to be in this moment, not wanting to be alive, not finding existence intolerable, to instead sit in this moment and be so overwhelmed by my gratitude and the beauty of the world and the beauty of connection and people, and how much I'm so grateful I didn't miss out on, and that I got to see this or see that. And it might just be a smile or a flower or the clouds or whatever. It is something so simple to really treasure and value that, and to just be grateful for the privilege to be alive. And because so many other people don't have that. They didn't
Yeah.
get that. Maybe they
Yeah.
didn't as when they were super young, or maybe they fell on hard times in the same way that I almost did. Maybe they're not here to experience that and to find a love and appreciation for that, and to even approach those hard pains or those life circumstances that come up and hurt or knock you down again, to go, yeah, but I'm here. And again, this is a weird privilege to even hurt in this moment, because I know I'll get through it again. And at least that means I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm human. I'm here. I'm doing the same thing as other. Now, I'm not inviting hurt, of course. That's not what I'm saying, nor encouraging that. Just that I don't take it as so much of a slight to myself or an offense or an affront to who I am, or with shame. It's just like, yeah, but being alive includes pain sometimes, and you're
Yeah.
going to get through it. You'll be fine, and you'll find the beauty on the other side of it, and you've learned how to mitigate the most harm. So they're small slights you're taking this time, but they're small, and the beauty of being here and being a person is always going to outweigh that. And I think finding peace and excitement in that again was when I really felt like I was approaching healing and made me change my view of what healing then henceforth will be. That it needs to include that excitement to be alive. And I think it always will be there. I think once you find it, it's hard to let go of, but it's something I aim to maintain in my elder years.
How old
There's
will I be in your elder years?
Oh,
I'll be a Magi by then.
there's so
Oh,
much deep wisdom in that. We're so conditioned to compare and despair all the time. And you're both talking about how can I just embody my own unique, authentic experience and embrace that for whatever it is and find those
absolutely.
moments of gratitude and appreciation. That's really cool.
For sure.
thank you.
And hard fought and hard to do. And I know it sounds very pie in the sky. I think I heard similar things when I was young and early in care. And I think it probably found it aversive and
Right.
probably a little annoying, but
Easy
once
to
you stumble
describe.
upon it honestly, and
Yeah.
once you come upon it earnestly, it's really hard to let go of, but it's absolutely possible. And I hope that listeners in the deep spaces stumble upon it themselves one day, even if you
Yeah,
can't believe it now and it sounds ludicrous. I hope when you accidentally trip over that rock later, you go, ah, that's the thing Lexi was talking about. She
that's
wasn't
it.
full of it. What do you
That's
know? I found it. I did.
Oh God, that's so funny. She wasn't lying.
She wasn't a big liar.
No.
As we wrap up, I have a
Yes.
convoluted question for both of you. It's
Love
a, it's a
convolutedness.
it's a two-part one sort of, right, for each of you. So, if you could give one message to survivors,
Mhm.
one message to providers to leave them with, whether that is, it can be anything, a message of hope, an area of exploring, anything at all that comes to your mind, what would that message to them be?
Oh, good question. I know I need to think for a bit. So if you
Oh,
have one ready, go for it.
oh, if well, okay.
Take
The
a
one
minute.
for survivors, there are too many. I that would honestly, oh, darling, that would depend on the survivor
Of course.
Yeah.
because it would be so different. But I think for me, the overarching message would be that I have witnessed, no, no joke, because of what we've done. It's been more than 10 years now, hundreds of people every year with dissociative identity disorder, many with OEA, lots and lots, thousands with CPTSD, that healing is not only possible, it's probable. And
Sure.
that it doesn't feel good now. It doesn't feel possible now because you haven't yet seen it. When we haven't seen it, it never feels possible. I mean, it's like anything. It's learning how to cook. When you're 5 years old, it feels impossible. Well, when you're five, it feels like you're the best. But you know what I mean. Um, but I have witnessed it countless times. It's probable. It's not just possible. So hang in there. You just need the right 1 + 1 = 2 in order to get there because it really is. It will happen. Now, when you talk about the providers, the first thing that came to mind was not a nice thing.
Oh no. Oh no.
Say, knock it off. But because I think there is a level of arrogance in a lot of the provisional world. Um, and I would like to see that tone a little bit and just to be very humble and to realize we're talking about a nation, not just a nation. We're talking about a global situation here. There are many, many people hurting, including clinicians. And if we could all embrace the fact that we are all hurting, and yet there are ways to heal, then the whole playing field changes. And when we come to that realization, it does become much easier. Because you can either be part of the solution or you can be part of the problem. And given that we're assuming as providers that we've elected to be part of the solution, there has to be a very big degree of authenticity and humility and all of those things. But to be honest and to be real and to not pretend we know what we're doing because people know that we don't know. And better to just say, I don't know. I'm willing to learn and I'll hold your hand until we learn it together. But I would like that would be my hope for all clinicians and all providers, whether it's insurance or face-to-face clinicians, to just be really super honest and transparent and um, and hold your tongue with some of the things that you say, because I think a lot of them have gotten to a point where they're just a little too aggressive and dismissive. So that would be my message for them.
Oh my brain, as I'm sure you can imagine, especially as someone with DID, has been
How many answers do you
flurrying,
have? How many
so
answers?
flurrying. I just keep flipping through the pages, and I'm like, I want that one and that one and that one. I want to say that one. I want to say that. Yeah, that's conveniently what we have a whole blog and Instagram for. You can find all the things I want to say. That. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing. But I actually will start with the clinicians. I imagine most who are listening to a podcast like this are actually going to be on the good side, the ones with humility. But just broadly to anyone, I feel like something I've learned and that I think is helpful is to try to challenge yourselves to not be afraid to just sit in the darkness. And I guess what I mean by that is I think it's really easy sometimes when a survivor or really any patient is sharing the depths of their darkness, the depths of their despair, the levels of hopelessness that they might be sitting in, or even if it edges to not wanting to be safe, especially if they're actually not wanting to be safe. I think sometimes it's very scary. I think it's really overwhelming. You want to protect this precious being in front of you, someone you clearly care about. And to see them hurt that badly is hard in and of itself, but especially if they're at a place where they're really, really threatening some tough stuff with themselves, it's very easy to want to shut it down right away or immediately come up with a safety plan or convince them why they need to stay or not do these things. And I think sometimes to just take a beat and be comfortable and just sit with them in that, just be present with them, let them share it all in earnest, and like let them trust you with that. I think a lot of times patients are very afraid to share it because they're afraid of the consequence. If I tell you how I really feel, you'll X, you'll Z, whatever, you'll put me somewhere or make me do this or that. So you don't get the authentic, you don't get their honesty. So you don't ever get to really know where they're at, and you don't really ever get to know their pain. I think if you can just be comfortable enough and willing enough to just sit there in it and maybe even validate aspects of those emotions, maybe not all of the motivations, just aspects of it, I think it can really help build that relational bridge, help them feel like they maybe came up to the edge, but they weren't alone on it. And someone could then kind of take their hand and walk them back and know that they're supported and not, hey, I walked out here and you abandoned me out here. You just left me out here and walked away or coming took me away or whatever. That's so much scarier if you can just be patient and brave enough. I know it's scary to just sit there and let it be and then be that supportive voice that comes in and holds that hand and takes that and says, hey, like, I get it, I understand, and here's what we can do, and now let's provide some resources and some levity and support and encouragement. I think sometimes that can go really far. um, so I feel like that's one of the most pivotal things I would encourage clinicians on. And for survivors, I feel like, I guess, in that note, or in that vein of some of that despair, to know that it it doesn't always have to feel like this. I promise there's a world where it doesn't always feel this way, even if it feels so out of touch and impossible. But I also know that for a lot of folks who find themselves in that level of unsafety or hopelessness or despair, or a lot of times it isn't actually a lack of desire of not wanting to be here or not wanting to live. It's just not wanting to live like this, not wanting to feel like this. And that is completely human and understandable. And something I think most of us would agree, no one deserves to live or feel like that. But there are ways that we can help you not feel like that. There are ways to make those feelings lighter, to unburden some of those burdens, to find support and community and understanding and know that you're not alone. In doing so, you might be surprised to find that you don't always feel this way, that it doesn't always feel like that, and that on that other side, there is a life that you might be so surprised by how much you fall in love with it, by how much is there that you couldn't see because the pain was too big, too dark, dimming all the colors and making everything black and white. Once you lighten some of that burden, once somebody helps you shoulder it, carry it, walk a little further, once you understand things weren't your fault, that you aren't too much, too big, too much, none of this is you. This is somebody else's baggage placed on you. Once you can do that, and color starts coming into the world, and joy is accessible, and levity is accessible, and hope is on the horizon, these might be things you have never actually experienced before. Maybe ever. Maybe most of us were hurt when we were young. You may have never honestly actually experienced them in the present as yourself, fully with all your senses and your faculties. How much there is to be excited by and thrilled by, and what an anesthetic to any lingering hurt that can be. There is just so much yet to discover, so much hope to find, and I really hope you stick around to experience it. And I would love that we can, or any of us, get it so lucky enough to be on the periphery to watch you experience it, or help you get there, or help you see that, because it is absolutely there. And you deserve to feel it. You deserve to know it. All of it in all of its colors.
What an incredibly beautiful note to end on.
Yeah.
Cannot thank both of you enough, truly.
Thank you. This was
Yeah,
enjoyable.
truly.
Yeah.
You are so wonderful. I'm so grateful for all that you offer, not just to survivors, but to clinicians, to the community, to everyone. It's such a tremendous resource, so much empathy and love and grace. I've been so heartened by all of your
Oh,
work, and so touched and
thank you.
thankful that you allowed us to be here today.
Yeah.
Thank you both for being here. I feel so blessed to be able to do this.
Yeah.
We
I'm
do
so
too.
proud of
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. There's something really powerful about hearing from people who don't just talk about healing, they build systems that help make it possible. Whether you're deep in your healing journey or still trying to find a starting point, we really hope today's conversation with Beauty After Bruises reminded you that you're not alone and that there are people out there fighting for better. And if you're a clinician, we hope that this conversation gave you plenty of ideas for resources for yourself to be able to provide great care for your clients. If this was an episode that resonated with you, that you found value in, we would absolutely love it if you shared it with somebody else who might benefit. And until next time, let's keep healing. Thank you for tuning in. You can find our blog on Substack at healingmyparts.substack.com and on Instagram at healingmyparts. Just a disclaimer, any information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for professional therapy or behavioral health care, nor does listening to the podcast constitute a therapist-client relationship. Please be sure to take extra good care of you. And until next time, keep healing and thriving.